Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started. Pete Mohr helps business owners transform their frustrations into freedoms, using a variety of frameworks that cut through the chaos and overwhelm of running a business. With over 30 years as a business owner, he has refined his tips, tools, and techniques in the trenches with his own companies in service and retail areas, helping leaders transform from operators to owners in his primary focus. As a certified exit planning and Colby coach, Pete uses proven methods to create a turnkey business, allowing owners to live the life they deserve. It's time to start using the frameworks that enable you to achieve true business freedom. Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Corey. I'm delighted to be here with you and your listeners today.
Well, listen, I mean, the word freedom was used several times in your bio, and considering my final question on the podcast, which we'll get to at the end, I'm very excited about that because, as my listeners know, that's a big value of mine. But before we get into more of that and all your various, roles you played and deal experience you've had, let me take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing, sort of a serial entrepreneur and business planner and business broker and coach and all the things you've done probably wasn't it back then, but you tell me.
I think being a business owner was always in the plan. And not knowing what that would look like, I guess. But, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My father ran a fairly large construction company. It wasn't his, but he ran it like it was because he operated it for an owner that had multiple businesses. So he kind of ran that. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she was always entrepreneurial. She's out there doing crafts, selling stuff, she always had things on the go. And she was sort of that entrepreneurial spirit, I guess, from that perspective. And lots of farmers in our family, lots of retailers in our family, the extended family. So I grew up in sort of this business owner mindset of, my all the people that I kind of know, loved, and trusted ran businesses. So right from the beginning, cut lawns, I shoveled snow, I did all the things that, you hear those kids doing. And, during high school, ran lawn cutting businesses and through university, different other little businesses and stuff like that. And I really only ever worked, Corey, for somebody who was actually, I'm named after, which was my dad's best friend. His name was Peter. And he had a heavy landscaping company that sold all sorts of products. And I worked for him coming in after university and did some stuff for him that he wanted done. And he said to me along the journey, and Peter was always one of those guys that was always helping me along with all my small businesses and stuff too, And he said, Pete, he goes, I think you're meant to be your own boss. And I said, I think so too. That was in 1994. And we look back as we just turned the calendar as we're recording this particular episode here in January of 25. They're over 30 years and time goes by and I wouldn't have traded it for anything. We've had our ups, we've had our downs, like a lot of entrepreneurial journeys, but it's been a great lifestyle for me and my family. And I think business ownership isn't for everyone, but it certainly was for us.
Yeah. It's amazing the contrast because I came from a family of no entrepreneurs. I had one uncle, who was like, oh, wait, he owns a bit. Like, it was strange because it was the only relative that actually owned the business. Everybody else, my parents worked for somebody their whole lives. And so people say to me, where did you get your entrepreneurial bug? And my answer is a lot less clear. It's like, I don't know because I really didn't have models, but I similarly had this, desire to not work for somebody for, for the rest of my life. And I was entrepreneurial as a kid as well. So it's funny how it comes up because I was sort of the opposite family, that you had.
And I think there are just people, like I said, it's not for everybody. If it was, everybody would be their own boss. And that's not in fact the case. Only whatever, 7 to 10% of us are. And, I'm another hat that I wear is I'm actually a certified Kolbe coach too. And with Kolbe, we start to see the alignments of how you make decisions and all this other stuff and we're not going to talk a whole lot about Kolbe today, but this whole thing around Kolbe is really kind of an interesting piece of the puzzle when we sort of overlay the Kolbe assessment onto how people communicate, how people make decisions, and there's certain profiles in there that's like, oh, I can see now why maybe this person, and you may not be the same as your parents, and that's okay. We're all different, right?
Exactly. And to know a plan. I mean, listen, one of the things that that's self-awareness, right? Like knowing where we belong. And, and one of the things that even some great entrepreneur, like, one of the things that, for example, Gary Vee says is that, there are plenty of people who would be much better off as a number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in an organization. And that, there's no judgment on that. That's cool. You just got to know who you are and what you're drawn to. I mean, I'm one of these people who couldn't breathe if I didn't have my own stuff. And we need those people. Then there are situational entrepreneurs, right? People who can go either way.
They're vital. Like we talked about my dad. My dad wasn't the actual business owner, but he did it. He ran it like it was his own business. He was the manager, and he got profit sharing and stuff, but he wasn't the owner. And from that perspective, we need these people to complement our business, to build the value of our business with us, so that we're working together to build this value, because getting into business is risky. And you got to build the value, and you got to build the profit and all that other stuff, along with enjoying your lifestyle and your freedom and all the other things that business ownership can bring you. Because if all you're doing is opening the door and closing the lights at night and working there 50 hours a week or 70 hours a week or 80 hours a week, is that really any better than a corporate job? It's not. And so these are the things that make everybody sort of start to think, do I want to be a business owner? Can I tolerate risk? Can I tolerate managing other people? Can I tolerate crappy customers? All these different things where if, you're working for somebody else and you just don't want to tolerate it anymore, you just walk out the door and you go work for somebody else. Not the same for business owners.
Yeah. So as I want to delve into that and the deal making, but let me go back. One more question. What was your first deal of any type that you can remember? Maybe it was something when you were younger as a kid, or was it early in your career, or purchasing?
My very first deal was I sold my grass cutting list.
Okay.
Yeah. Literally in my teens, I had built up a little grass cutting business in high school and my first year or two of university. And, I had established clients that came back year after year. And I literally sold that little list of whatever it was, 50 or 60 clients at the time, to another landscaping company. And it wasn't a big sellout or anything like that, but it was like, hey, I did a deal,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I've shared on this podcast before, listeners who listen regularly would know this, but this is like another contrast. And I think this is the difference maybe between you coming from an entrepreneurial family and me not, is when I was 15, I used to deliver flyers door to door in Brooklyn, New York, for a company, right? They pay you a penny a flyer. And I would stop in stores on my route and I would get my own accounts and hire my friends to go deliver the flyers, right?
Yeah.
And I was making, I'm going back, this is before I went to college, so, I'm older than you, this is in the 70s, right? Mid 70s, I'm making like $300 a week as a 15-year-old kid in the 70s. That was absurd money. But I wasn't smart enough. I didn't understand the value. So when I went away to college, I just stopped doing it. I didn't understand that I didn't understand enterprise value. And I understand that I had something that I probably could have sold, even if it was for a few bucks, to somebody to take over that business. But I just left it because I didn't even understand that concept back then.
There's all kinds of unrealized value.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I also work with Value Builder and Value Builder techniques and a lot of stuff there. And yeah, it's just so interesting when you get in, because a lot of people just don't know.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to ask one more question on that regard before we get into all of your deal experience.
Yeah, sure.
So, one of the things you say, people just don't know. I didn't know as a 15-year-old kid, but people, even very successful entrepreneurs who are great at, let's say, sales or otherwise growing their business organically, right? I always make this distinction. We talked about the distinction between an employee and an entrepreneur, but there's also a distinction between an entrepreneur and a deal maker, right?
For sure.
And there are plenty of successful entrepreneurs who are deal makers. They're great at sales or marketing or providing great products and services or, whatever it is, and they do very, very well. In what you do, what do you see in terms of the characteristics of the people who start thinking that additional way of growth or building enterprise value or exit value versus the ones who don't?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, Corey. We could talk for days. And it really just depends, because I do a lot of family transition work.
Yeah.
So from like a next gen type thing, where family, the mom and dad have been working in the business for 50 years and the kids have been working maybe sometimes 2 years, but sometimes 20 or 30 years and still aren't owners. Sure. And like things haven't been talked about and all this sort of stuff. So everybody's at a different level. And, the real thing when I first start talking to people is to really dig down into what level are they at. Yeah. And one of the things that helping people get their business ready to sell as a certified exit planner is that everybody has different acumen. Some people know books, some people don't know books. Some people know sales, some people don't know sales. Some people know human resources, other people don't know human resources. Other people have their process in line and it's like humming. Other people are like, no, it's all right here in my head. So we need to pull that. We need to extract that because they have a successful business. And it's been going 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, sometimes third, fourth, fifth generation. Talked to somebody earlier today, sixth generation. Wow. So, these businesses have been around a long time. This particular business that one that I spoke to last week, a big business, doing, not a huge business, but they're doing $30 million. Good sort of wholesaler. And they have been going since the early 1800s. Amazing. Right? And as we're here in 2025, 200 and some years going now for this business. And they're starting to say, the next gen doesn't necessarily want to take it. And what are we going to do? How are we going to exit? They have never, ever really contemplated until recently the fact that somebody else might actually own this business one day. Yeah. Not just the kids. Yeah. What does that mean? How does it need to be set up? How do we bring clarity in all the structures? As well as I do, deals go down because of things that aren't clear. People will pick apart your business in due diligence. Absolutely. You can't hide stuff when you're talking. If we were talking a little grass cutting list for $2,000 or whatever it is, that's one thing. But we're talking about like some serious cash here. And if people have your business to look at and they're looking at a series of 3 or 4 others, they're going to do their homework. They're going to do their comparatives because they're putting hard cash down and they want to make sure that they de-risk their business investment in you and your business. And if it isn't set, and people are like, especially those people who have been doing it for a long time, well, this is just the way we do it. We don't have to, go through. Yeah, you do.
Yeah. And it's interesting in that one case that you mentioned, that it's not the only one. Like when it finally goes outside the family, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, those multi-generation family businesses, part of their brand, part of their reputation, part of, a good part of their relationships are based upon the family, right? Yes. Yes. So for a buyer, there's a whole, you talk about financial due diligence, legal due diligence, HR due diligence, tech due diligence, whatever. But there's this sort of additional element of due diligence, right? Like, okay, how is taking this outside of family ownership going to impact? Are we going to lose that mystique? Are we going to lose half the clients that we're paying for or the customers, because, it's a significant difference because usually a lot of the lore and the whole thing around, the company and the brand is related to that family ownership of it, right?
Yeah. So when I've got a structure, it's called the 6 Ps, and the structure really it's an operating structure, but it's really understanding your promise, which is the promise that you make to take people from their pain to their gain, your unique sort of set of products and services. And when we align our product, we align our process, we align our people to it, and then we promote that, we get the right amount of profit. But the people portion that you just talked about is the one that got me thinking about that, which is I look at 3 different types of people in every business. 1, your ideal customer. 2, or client, whatever you want to call it. 2, your ideal teammate. 3, your ideal outsourced suppliers that helps deliver your promise. So we own some shoe stores. So that would be all the brands and different things like that, right? And my outsourced marketing person that's making sure that we're in alignment with the promise and all this other stuff, right? But that team portion is another one too. When we look at family business, it's like how many of the team members that are making the pivotal decisions in the business are actually family members. Are they going to stay on? Are they not going to stay on? And not only that, the connections to those particular family members, even if those family members leave, are we gonna be able to keep the culture of the rest of all of the other managers? Such a pivotal piece, and it can cause heavy discounting of a family business when there's too much of that within the structure of decision making within the business. So one of the things is to ensure when we're looking at that, are we going to spend a year or two before we put this up for sale in order to get some of these things straightened away so that the family isn't making the decision and we can prove with clarity that things are happening without the family in place. And yeah, the family name is still, on the signboard up top or whatever the case is. Sometimes it even involves, are we going to make the switch of branding before that? And that may, in fact, if we have a bit more time, 5 to 7 years, do we switch the brand now so it's not I'll just use shoes, for example. It's not more shoes, it's Shootopia. And we'll use our systems and all the stuff to go. So we're building Shootopia brand, and then we'll flip the Shootopia brand at a later time because it'll have more value potentially than more shoes.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So I want to take you back because we'll come back and talk a little, more about what you do now and your experience, but you have such a, deal, entrepreneurial and deal history in various ways. So I want to go back because, you've franchised, you've defranchised, you've owned franchise businesses, you've done all kinds of consulting and business brokering and coaching for people. So let's go back. So, we left you when you were going to uni. And by the way, people who either caught the university as opposed to college reference or the without pronunciation may have gathered that Pete's Canadian. And I think about half of his business is in the U.S., right? So you do Canada, US, and
a lot of coaching
places as well,
for sure.
But in any case, so when we left you and you went to uni, where'd you go from there? And how'd you get into, what was your first deal? And talk about, and I really want to, we've had a number of people talk about franchising recently. So, if there's anything interesting about that, but we've had nobody talk about defranchising. So I definitely want to get there, but let's
tell that story.
Yeah.
So I told you about Peter. So I worked for Peter for 6 months. And during that last little bit, but these are back in the days, and Corey, you're of the same vintage. Where did you go when you're looking for a franchise? You went to Entrepreneur Magazine.
Of course.
And start opening that, flipping through Entrepreneur Magazine, and you see the different stuff, and you're calling the thing, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. So I'm a young kid. I'm 23. I do have some money saved because I had my little businesses and stuff. Yeah. And so there was this company called Surface Doctor at the time. And Surface Doctor was a company that we did refinishing of bathtubs. We did refinishing, like change your Harvest Gold tub to white, change your avocado green fridge to white, and change your dark oak cabinetry to white. Would come in and spray oak cabinetry, all that kind of stuff. So we basically held a spray gun and sprayed everything to white for the most part. We did other colors, but at that time it was all, let's go to white. And so I'm like, $10,000, and we fly down to Atlanta, did their discovery day for a 3-day weekend and kind of learn about it. I came back and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. So go back down for training for a couple weeks. And, I had a week's business training, which I didn't need because I already had a business degree and I knew more than they were really teaching. And then the second week was practical. Like, how do I hold a spray gun? What do I do? All this stuff. 1 week, that was it. Right. And it's like, okay, now you're on your own, like kick you out. Right. So it's that sort of low entry level franchise. I was number 20 in the franchise network, and they sold a couple hundred of them along the way. But essentially, within about 2 years, they sold the franchise to another group. This guy was really good at building franchises and then selling them out. So he had 4 of them on the go, all service-based, professional carpet systems, furniture medic. And he continues to do stuff, but he sold it to another company. And then the other company had it for a while, and they were terrible franchisors, just terrible. No support, nothing going on. It was just bad. And they sold it to another one. And after the third franchisor, within 5 years, I start fishing through my franchise agreement. And I'm like, how am I going to get out of this thing? Because I'm not using them for anything and they're of no value. And I just got to move on. So I dug through it and yeah, there's a buyout clause. So I went to the buyout clause, I filled out the paperwork, I did all the stuff. I sent that, I said, I want out of the franchise. Here's my buyout money and here's your check essentially to pay out. And I defranchised the business. I stripped all my vans because I had several vans on the road with all the logos and all that stuff. So I did it properly. Like I wasn't playing around the corners or anything like that. I wanted to do it right. Yeah. So we stripped all the vans. I called it Surface Medic, which I actually asked them if they would be offended if I called it Surface Medic, and they said, no, go ahead. You're in Canada and blah, blah, blah. You're going to do what you're going to do. So, but even then I asked for approval there. I got it. No problem. It's not Surface Doctor. That's fine. It's a different business. And so that was about 1999 or so when we did that, or 2000. James, who owns the business now, I sold it in 2009, so I had it for 15 years. James, that owns the business now, called me in September of this past year on the 30th anniversary, and he said, Pete, you owned it for 15 years. I've owned it for 15 years. It was good to both of us.
That's a beautiful story. I love that. And listen, I love that you did it right. I mean, one of the things when I've had franchise folks on is, listen, there's advantages and disadvantages to every business model.
For sure.
And one of the things about, a franchise is that, the franchisee does not own the brand, all right? The franchisor owns the brand. Sometimes they have other clause in you. Sometimes they own the real estate, and that could be, if you're a retail or food or whatever, where location's important, that could be issues. So yeah, I mean, looking at to see whether you have these kind of buyout clauses or other ways that you can get out. And trust me, I mean, if you don't do it right, some of them are going to sue you because it's not only about you, it's about they don't want to set a precedent for all the other franchisees, right?
For sure.
So smart move. All right. So you defranchise and then, you run the thing and then you sell it, right? 15 years.
I got to tell you,
come to the conclusion, like after 15 years, it was time to sell?
Yeah, I got to tell you another little story that links in.
Sure.
So during my time, franchisor number 2 owned another franchise too. So they had multiple franchises as well. Yes. And it was called Swisher in the States, Sandy Service here in Canada. It was a bathroom cleaning company. Okay. And so the Swisher franchisee in my town in Ottawa, where I was living, was failing miserably, going bankrupt. So the company said to me, they said, hey, you own our Surface Doctor. Would you be interested in taking on Swisher? And I said, well, I'll look at it. So basically they gave it to me for, I bought the materials that were left over and they just essentially handed over the franchise because they wanted somebody there and the guy was literally walking away and not serving his customers anymore. So at the time it had 30 cleaning clients, and we grew it to 300 cleaning clients. And weekly basis going in and servicing our customers and what have you. So we had a good run of 10 years with that business too, and exited it in 2009 as well. So what got me to that point? Well, after 15 years of doing the one and 10 years of doing the other, so I ran both of them simultaneously, I just decided that I wanted to change. So I went back to school and I sold those in 2009. I went back to school and taking my executive MBA in 2007 and doing that sort of on Fridays, 1 week, Saturdays, the next week, and kind of doing that alternating while running the business and having little kids and all that kind of stuff. But the goal was after 2 years, I wanted to have both of those businesses sold. And I wanted to work for big business for 4 or 5 years and then maybe come back into owning my own business at a later date. Well, that was 2007, 2008, which, was the crash. So that wasn't really going so well as I exited my executive MBA. Now, I did sell both of those businesses. But while I took my executive MBA, one of my core projects was for the master franchisee for Sunbelt Business Brokers here and you guys have Sunbelt in the States, but the guy that owned all of Canada and he sub-franchised the provinces and different areas and stuff was in Ottawa. And I did my keynote project for him, working through some stuff that he wanted to work through and what have you. And he said to me, Pete, he sold one of our businesses. We sold the other one independently. And he said, why don't you become a business broker and come work with me? And I'm getting older and maybe you want to take this business over. So I said, that sounds really interesting. So I became a licensed business broker and, went to work for Sunbelt, went to work for Greg at the time. But I soon found out within about 6 months that Greg wasn't a guy that was ever going to release the reins and that he was going to stay in his business probably forever. So, and, this is 15 years ago, and I know he's still in his business today. So I basically said, well, this isn't the right call for me, because as much as I like being a business broker and I like doing the deals, like I like doing the deals and working them and stuff like that, I wanted to run that business. Like that my sort of plan was to get in there and buy that from him and go from there. So what I was doing at the time, selling businesses. So I pitched Shootopia, which we still own today, 15 years later. I pitched it to another guy. The problem with that particular gentleman was he said, well, I live in Ottawa, which we were in Ottawa at the time. And he goes, and this business is in Fergus, Ontario. It's 5 hours away. He goes, great business, like it and everything. He goes, I'm not moving to some little small town. I'm not moving my family to some little small town in southwestern Ontario. Like, we're from Ottawa. And I said, well, that's fine. So we found him another business, all that kind of stuff. Great. But we looked at this because in deals, when you're doing the deals, you're down in the numbers, you're digging it up because you got to know it, right? And I'm like, this is a good business. So I talked to my wife. And I said, and we are small town people because I was living in a small town outside of Ottawa when I was commuting for my service businesses over the years. And I said, this is a nice little business. Our kids are at an age where we could move them at this stage. Do we want to look at this business? So we look at the business. I drove the 5 hours on a Saturday, went in, and it was this time of year, it was in January, when nothing's happening in footwear retail. Like it's slow. So, and I sat there and I looked and like not much happening. I go in the store, served well, bought a pair of shoes, left, kind of drove around the town. I'd been to the town once before, but not really, drove around the town. And then I said, okay, well, that's good enough for today. Drove back the 5 hours same day, coached my kids in hockey on Sunday. And then on Monday, I said to my wife, we got to go back. So we hopped in, my wife and I, did the same thing. Drove up on Monday, sat in the little restaurant next to the store, watched what's going on. She went in and bought a pair of boots that time. And then it's like, do we want to do this? And then we drove around the town. We drove around the community. Where would we live? What would we do? How would we figuring this all out? Is this the right fit for us? Went back on Tuesday, put the offer in. It was accepted. And I moved, took over April 1st, and the kids and the family moved at the end of the school year in June. And that was 15 years ago. And, we still own it. We bought another business, another shoe business. We rebranded it. We moved it. We closed it. We also have another shoe store. So we did have 3 stores. Now we're down to 2. But the second store that we opened in another small town about 30 miles away, it's going to celebrate its 10th anniversary here this April, and both of the stores do really well. And it's one of the things that I'm just happy to have those in my portfolio of businesses that I have.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to corykupfer.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back for the show. Let's move over to your, work with clients now, what you're doing now. And obviously, one of the things that I noticed, in looking at your stuff, whatever, is that, listen, I mean, there's a lot of people can teach theory. A lot of people can, maybe even be great with certain aspects of business. Like they really understand numbers and they can, but I am a believer that there is nothing like, like if I have a coach or a consultant or a trainer or a whatever, right, who's going to help me through something, the first question I ask is, well, did you do that something before yourself, right? And again, like there are people who disagree with that, and there might, certainly there are some very, very good, even at the high end, investment bankers who,
for sure.
Provide significant value, especially if you're at a particular point where if they put fuel on the fire and they grade it, like doing M&A, for example, or whatever. I'm not saying there aren't other people that bring value, but certainly in the middle market, lower middle market, and mainstream, any from mainstream business up to, maybe lower or even middle market.
Yeah.
I think actual experience, it certainly makes a difference. So talk to us a little bit more about exactly, what you're doing now. And we talked a little bit about the family transition stuff, about the value builder stuff. But, give us a little more of the types of people you're working with and tie in like how all these, not only entrepreneurial, but deal experiences influence the way you work with clients.
Yeah. Well, I align with certain associations as part of my coaching. So, for example, I don't only do retail stuff, but probably 50% of my business is in the retail field because, like you said, I'm there, I'm living it and all that kind of stuff. So about 50% is in the retail. So, for example, I'll use Dance, our National Shoe Retailers Association is one of the groups that I work with, and they have 1,800 or so members, stores, and all this other stuff. So I speak at their conferences. I run round tables. Like in Atlanta next month, I'll be doing a whole day seminar for Next Gen for family transition with them. Outside of that particular group for Next Gen, then we take that outside and as we carry on, because everybody here knows when you go to a conference, you have all these great ideas and then you come home, they sit in the book that you wrote them down in. So it's like, how do we carry them on? Well, we carry them on with biweekly meetings and we're rolling through that stuff to make sure I do work with one-on-ones as well in certain cases when we're doing stuff. And sometimes those will bleed into the family transition stuff where it's like, okay, let's have the crucial conversations. Let's get the stuff out on the table because a lot of times the biggest issue with these things is communication isn't happening.
Yeah.
So they need a moderator in there. They need someone to ask the questions. They need someone to get them on the same page. Because I can tell you, and we won't spend the whole time on family transition, but, and I'll use an example. There's a shoe group that I know that has multiple stores and mom and dad have been owners for 50 years, give or take, and kids have been in it for 30 years. And, kids have a ownership stake. So when I ask them, do you guys actually own it? Because I know you're accountable because you're actually running it. Because there's these two lines. There's accountability and then there's ownership, right? And parents are easy and quick to pass on accountability, but they are not quick to pass on ownership.
Very true.
And this is a problem in so many small businesses. So let's talk about it. Let's get it out on the table because one thing is for sure, you will exit your business one day.
Mm-hmm.
So we might as well have the structure in place to allow that to happen if and when you're ready, because sometimes you will have to. And you don't want it to be when you die. You don't want it to be when there's a partnership disagreement and you have to leave. You don't want it to be when you're disabled and you can't make the calls and the decisions. You don't want those things because I'm sure the people that are listening, these kind of things, somebody that this has happened to and the business wasn't ready and the family wasn't ready and all the things weren't ready.
Yeah.
How important is it for you to have your business exit ready, which is why I called my business, I call my website the Exit Ready Business, but how important it's crucial. It's a vital part of your strategy to have your business exit ready at all times, or at least close to exit ready as you possibly can. Because again, I'll use a personal story. I lost both of my parents within 10 months, about a year, between 2 years and a year ago. Mm-hmm. I was gone from my business for probably 6 months.
Yeah.
Helping my mom out as my dad passed, pre my dad passing, helping them get out, selling the house, doing all the stuff. They live 5 hours away, like we were talking about earlier. And I was back and forth, helping my sister as we're working through all this stuff, the family stuff. I was not part of my shoe business very much. I was, letting some stuff go. And I'm so glad I had a great team. I do have process. I do have people making decisions. All this, things were happening for me. Our business grew when I wasn't even there. And so all of these kind of things happened while I was virtually absent for about a 6-month period of time.
Wow.
And that's what I coach to. You're asked kind of what I'm doing. It's like, if you want that for your business so that you start working in the area, because here's the other thing. When people get to the point in time where they're saying, maybe it's time to sell, because we get to that point, right? It's like, maybe it's time to sell. Well, if you're thinking about maybe it's time to sell, I can tell you that if your business isn't exit ready, you're going to leave value on the table, which is how we started the conversation. You're going to leave value on the table because you probably need 1 to 3 years at least to get that business to the point where you're going to maximize the value. And if you leave value on the table, the legacy that you leave to your kids, all the things, and for those that aren't in the position that they're retiring and they want to take this bundle of cash and do something else with it, buy the next business, do the next thing, you're leaving the availability of that next thing it's underwhelming.
Yeah.
So we need to get these things in place so that we can maximize the value of the business before you list it with a business broker and before you're ready to go to the deal and before you're ready to announce to everybody this is ready to go and here you come take it and I'll take the cash. And that's kind of where it's at. So I do a lot of work with transfers, whether it's next gen or whether it's helping people get that business ready so that when they come in, the business broker says, all right, it's ready to go.
Yeah. And listen, you've sold businesses, right? You've done you've been through it, right? So you have that personal experience, which is great. It's interesting to me because I feel like there was a time a while back that this conversation of exit ready and building enterprise value from the beginning and understanding the drivers and whatever wasn't so present, right? Like people sort of just did their thing and they grew it.
Yeah.
And other than the high tech, like the people who are coming out trying to build unicorns who are building it from the beginning, knowing that they're looking to raise private equity, venture capital, whatever. And they're, but your, usual business. And now it's talked about so much more. There are books on it. There are, certified exit planners. There are all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying it hasn't improved because I think it has, but I would assert, and maybe you'll disagree with me and feel free to if you want, that with the additional awareness, resources, ecosystem that's been built up around this, you would think like there's still a gap between, the businesses that truly get exit ready and the resources that are available now to help them. You would think more of them would be exit ready.
You would think. And so I'm in complete alignment with you, but that's why I'm doing what I do.
Yeah.
Right. Because maybe over the last 10 years, we've gone from 5% exit ready to 15% exit ready. And so good, we're getting there, but there's still 85% that aren't exit ready.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh. And this is the kind of stuff because let's talk about freedom. We also talked a little bit about freedom at the beginning. When your business is exit ready, you have more freedom. And the nice thing about when your business is exit ready, now you look at it as, and I said earlier, I also said I love having a couple of shoe stores in my portfolio. You start looking at them as investments, not as your job.
Yeah.
Does this invest for the amount of money this is worth? First of all, do I even know what it's worth? Which is another issue that most small business owners have no clue.
Yes.
Right? Do I even know that it's worth? So we do a range of value assessment for them. And, we don't give them the specific because that's a much more depth, but we do a range of value. And so it's like, oh, that's not what I expected. My buddy sold for X amount, or somebody around the corner or on the other side, I heard somebody, on the other side of the country sold for that and I should be able to get that. That's not good enough.
Yeah.
So what is a range of value that your business is worth? That's sort of one of the things that we get into and do the value builder assessment. And then the next piece is if that number doesn't suit you, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
And that's the action items that sometimes take more time than you think. So if you're getting to this point where it's like, I'm ready to, it's not a house. You can't just list it and expect it to be gone within the next 3 months. Sometimes it does, but that's not the usual. And there's financing, there's all sorts of different things. There's due diligence. And even on small businesses, it can be a lengthy process. And you know what? It could be troublesome. And the number one person, you probably talk about this on some of your episodes, who's the number one person that causes the failure of the deal?
Well, there's a couple of ways you can go on this. A lot of people blame my profession, the lawyers, but it's more. But if he's talking about buyer and seller, it's usually the buyer. It's usually the buyer on due diligence, right? I don't know if that's what you're going for.
We find the seller.
Really, that's interesting. I guess it depends upon the. Well, okay, so
The seller backs out.
Okay, hang on. Let me make a distinction because I'll tell you where I would agree with you, and maybe we're on this. Is that
cool? I think it's a fun topic.
Yeah. It's a fun topic because if we're talking about owner operators, which is I think more of what you're talking about on the sell side,
Yeah.
then yes, I 100% agree with you. Like more of, and some of, our folks that, well, we have both. Yeah. So I think
Like I'm talking under 10 million.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think on the bigger businesses, with a more of an executive team or whatever,
Yeah.
it's more often the buy side on due diligence, but you're right. I think on, at that level, no question, it's the sellers. And a lot of times it's because, like, I've told stories on this podcast that I want to get your view on it, but where it's stuff that's like, whereas on bigger deals, I'm not saying there isn't emotion and other things involved in bigger deals, but, a lot of times the math and the numbers and the deal structure, whatever, is much more. But I've had deals that have died or almost died on somebody not like realizing they don't want to give up their legacy. Somebody like I've saved deals by letting somebody become chairman emeritus and still have an office in the place, even though they had But yeah, so no, on that level, I agree with you. I agree with you on the sell side.
They're not ready.
Yeah.
They think they are. Either they're not mentally ready, they're not physically ready, they're not financially ready.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they don't have a life after.
Yes.
They've spent their 50 years doing what they do and they don't know what they could possibly do. So as much as they thought about retirement would be nice, they get to that ending point and they find something wrong with the deal to cancel it.
Yes. No, agree with you on that. And that's where creative professionals, first of all, if somebody's worked with somebody like you on the sell side or as a planner, you're going to hopefully have, I know you will have worked and hopefully they'll get it for them to think through all these things. Oh, what am I going to do after this? Can I really give up my, the legacy? Is there some way I want to, stay involved? And when we've been on the buy side, like I said, I think that's where if you have creative professionals, because like the one example I gave, the deal was dead. the guy was backing out, and I just had this sense, and I had a sort of off the record conversation with the guy's counsel, not off the record, but counsel to counsel. And what is he second guessing? And, I just can't let go, whatever. Well, what's important to him? He seems exhausted. He doesn't want to run the business. No, he really doesn't. But, it's his name, it's his legacy. It's this. So I went back to my client. I said, listen, make him chairman emeritus and let him keep his office. Okay. Give him a place, because it was clear to me he wanted a place to go to. He was afraid about being home and he didn't want to just totally disassociate from it. And it got the deal done. The deal done.
It's so interesting when we dig into that stuff because, we call it sort of the three legs of the stool. Is your business ready to go? Are you personally, financially ready to go?
Yes.
And do you have a life after? And for so many business owners, they don't have a life after. And 70% of them are upset that they sold their business a year later because they say, here are the words that come out. Oh, I'm going to play more golf. Oh, we're going to do some traveling. Well, you can only play so many rounds of golf and you can only go on so many trips. And after that first year or two is done, then what?
Yeah.
So you got to have a life plan. Then that's part of, and I'm not a life planning person, but it's certainly part of the discussions of getting their thoughts around. Because a lot of this is mindset. A lot of it's about getting, have you thought this through? Have you thought this through? Because now we got to put them in the buyer's perspective too, right? And the buyer's going to say, well, why is this and this that way? And you got to have the right answers. It has to be clear. And we have to think about all these different things, or else from the buyer side, they're going to come in and they're going to say, we're going to take this down from this multiple to this multiple, right?
Yeah.
Because, we say, people talk, and profit's so important in the business, but when it gets to this stage, multiple is multiple. And if there's whatever, it doesn't matter. If there's 100,000, if there's 1 million, well, 1 times 1 million, 4 times 1 million is a big difference.
That's right.
And that's the kind of stuff that we do, trying to get some stuff ready with clarity and syncopation and all the different things, so that when those questions are asked, when that stuff comes up, the answers are there. It's pretty clear. It's pretty straightforward. And the writing's on the table. It's like, this is how it is.
Yeah. Love it. All right. We're coming at time. But before I ask you my final 2 questions, I do want to get your Bill, are there any trends you're seeing, in the market, buy side, sell side types of deals? Obviously, economic factors. Obviously that's another conversation we could spend a day talking about. But any big things that come to mind that would be interesting for people to hear about before we close out?
And I'm sure you've talked about this. It's not news really, but I think there's still an amalgamation happening. A lot of small family independents are being gobbled up. It doesn't matter what the industry is, whether it's retail, whether it's wholesale, so this sort of, whether it's family farms, right? We see it in every industry.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going away. I think that's going to continue on. So, do you want to be part of the acquiring? Because that's the other side of the story, right? Like, are you going to compete with those guys that are starting to amass some serious amount of combined strategy and combined wealth and, all that stuff? I'll just use footwear for an example. The days of having one, and we have two, but the days of having one store, the way they used to be run is very hard. Like, they have to be a pretty significant store to make one store go from a family standpoint. Most of the people have two or more. And then we're seeing even now where most of them are getting into 6 to 12 stores and some moving into, like, I've got a buddy who's got 180. So, these kind of things, as we look at the amalgamations of these kind of things, and it really doesn't matter what business, we're seeing these amalgamations. And so where does your exit strategy fit? I'm asking you, the listener, where does your exit strategy fit? Like, or do you think that that's going to be one of the things that happens? Do you think your family's going to come in and take over? And do they want to grow even more? So they go from whatever your one thing to 6 times or 10 times where it's at right now? Is that something that you guys can think about and work on? Or do you want to be one of those other people and a piece of the puzzle of the bigger piece? Because I think those are the biggest things that are happening these days. Those one-off to one-offs aren't happening as much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we definitely see that as well in various industries. So Pete, if people want to find out more about your work, if they want to work with you, if they want to find out more, where do they go?
From this standpoint, the best way to go is to my Exit Ready. So the exitreadybusiness.com is my Exit Ready site. You can also go to Pete-Mohr, MOHR.com, which is sort of my main site with all the other sites of things that I do. But that's the best place to start the journey. And you can take there's all sorts of downloads there for you to start your journey, or take the value builder assessment that we talked about, get a range of value, all that kind of stuff. It's there.
Love it. So, Pete, my final question of the podcast, as I sort of foreshadowed, and any of my listeners know, is actually about freedom, which is my highest value in life. And for me, that means everything from freedom for people from oppression around the world to why I've been an entrepreneur and I've been a boss for decades. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business? And I will, because we've talked about it so much more, and obviously it's what help you other people do, maybe I'll ask you to really say, okay, not in terms of how you help other people get freedom, but what does freedom mean to you, Pete Mohr, personally?
I don't need to do this, Corey.
Yeah.
I don't need to coach people. I've got a couple of successful retail stores that provide me a good living, and, we've got some stuff on the go. And so freedom to me is, I've got another exercise that I'll briefly talk about. It's called the Love It Zone. And it's when you're really working in the area of what I call your love it zone. Some people call it a genius zone or whatever the case is.
Yes.
But it's where work doesn't feel like work.
Yes.
And people ask me, when are you going to retire? And it's like, I don't have any intention on retiring.
No.
I don't want to retire. What I want to do is continue working in my love it zone because I love it. And so what does freedom mean to me? It means to be where I want to be, work from where I want to work with those that I want to work with, and work with those from a client perspective, and work with those from a team perspective, and work with those with the 3 pieces of the P, of the 6 Ps that we talked about of people. If that's in alignment, why would I ever want to retire?
Yeah.
And so freedom to me doesn't mean that I have to be stapled down to a desk and I have to open the door and close the door and all that stuff at the stores. And yes, I own some shoe stores, and yes, I work in them. It's not like I never go there. I'm there when I'm still the owner. I'm still go in when I'm needed to, but I'm not needed. I haven't hired anybody in about 7 years within our business. So I'm there for the things that matter, and I'm there for my team when they need me. I'm there for the certain clients that need me and want me, and all that sort of stuff. And to me, that's freedom to spend time with my family. I'm going to go see some kids who live out west, to a couple of kids here. I'm going to do a lot more speaking this year, which is something I really love to do on stage, and talk to different people and get to meet other entrepreneurs. Love talking these conversations, love having them. And you know what? For me, that's freedom.
Love it. Pete Mohr, thanks for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thanks for having me, Corey. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to kupferlaw.com. That's kupferlaw.com, and if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.